In this video help, we're going to cover the Do Action menu, the balance of the buttons, and then we're going to go through these three popovers. We're going to go through all of the different screens that are in here, but just touching base on each one of them so you know how they're used. We'll cover a little bit more about doing finds and other information. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is go to the Do Action button by clicking on it. If I click a second time, it disappears, and that's the same for any popover like these over here and the Do Action button. In the Do Action button, we did start with the Start Find and Perform the Find. If you do a find and you have a set of records that is not all the records in any one screen, you can do that by doing a find and create that. If you want to bring back all the records, you go down to the Show All button and click on the Show All button, and it brings the records back. You'll notice this when you're in a list view, when the records disappear or there doesn't seem to be all the records to view. That is because somebody did a find or you did a find, and in order to return all the records you would hit the Show All button. So if you're in a list view and you're not certain if all the records are being viewed, click the Show All button. If you're going from record to record in, say, like this screen, if you click on Next, it'll go to the next record. You can click back to go to the first button, then go to the prior button from whatever one you're in. Now understand, if you're in a prior record and it's the actual first record, it'll go nowhere. But if you go next and then prior, it'll move back and forth between the two records. Or you can go all the way to the last record in all the group of records that you're looking at. Sometimes you want to do that if you're in a list view where you want to go to the last record and say there's hundreds of records in the list view and you want to go to the last. Or you can just do a find to go find the record you're looking for. Omit a record is quite interesting. If you omit a record, the current record you're viewing will be omitted, meaning that it's going to be taken out of the current group of records. Then if you did several records omitted, you could say Show Omitted, and it'll flip from all the records that you have in this current selection to only the omitted records. It's an interesting way to use that. We'll try to do something with that. Exporting records and importing records. Exporting records can be done in the individual screen you're viewing based on the fields that are in that screen. If you try to do an export from another screen and try to use the records that are in this screen, it won't work. You have to do it in the screen where the records exist. If you do it in a portal record, you can do that also, because portal records have fields in them that are related to the main record, which is the parent. Import. You can import into a desktop, either Mac, Windows, or on the cloud. But on iOS devices, they don't support importing, and that's just an inherent problem with the iPad and iPhone. They're not set up for anything actually to import. Print records, and let's go ahead and look at these. Let's go to Export. When you have an export come up, it's allowing you to go ahead and pick a name and then tell you where you want to put it. If you were looking at this on an iOS device, the iOS device would pop up a different looking screen for import or export, but basically they're pretty easy to figure out. One of the things you want to do when you're doing an export or import is to figure out, basically export, if you want to use a tab delimited. Now comma separated is useful on certain things that need comma separated, but it's less used. Same thing with DBF. Merge is for things like word processors where you want to merge data. HTML is strictly for things where you want to put them into a program that accepts HTML tables. FileMaker Pro, if you're moving data from one app to another, you can use FileMaker, and the formatting and everything is exactly what you need in order to move things back and forth. XML is not used by most people. It's very obscure. Excel is probably the most used because what it does is it gives you a list with the table of fields, and the fields would be in the group based on the name of the field at the top. So when you go ahead and, for example, if I say Save and Tab Delimited, I go to the next screen. One of the things you need to know how to do is to move what fields you want exported for the current screen you're viewing. You can move one field, for example, if I wanted to move that one, I could say Move It, and it would move it. You can apply the current layout data formatting, and that would work only in specific cases, and it's not something that's used that often. Or what you can do is say Move All and bring all the record data over in all the fields. And then we'd say, for example, you take them over to Excel, then you could delete or take out the things you don't want. Now some of the things that are in there are things that you don't want, I'm sure. For example, the general comments would not be something you'd probably want to take out. and put into the system, because what you're looking for is single field data, and you cannot export video or stills or any kind of images because they're not exportable, because they're basically a text, but they're text as far as like a JPEG file or something like that. So you cannot export the images. You can copy and paste them into something if you wanted to right out of the screen. And then export, when you click that, it takes a couple seconds and it creates a file, the one you named, and it exports it out to either your desktop, or in this case, if you're exporting it on the iPad or iPhone, the export screen gives you some options to export it to another device or something as a file on your actual iPad that can be attached to an email and sent to somebody. PDF files are typically also used where you can export them and then take that as a PDF file and use it to send it to somebody. Okay, let's go over and look at the popovers. Now, popovers are kind of interesting. The way that I'm using popovers may be unique. I'm taking the structural way that you would order put things in and put things in each individual screen. So for example, in this application, there's a screen which is one called Call Management, one that's called Meeting Management, one called Action Item Screen. Those are actually screens, and if you look at them here, they're shown as portals. Now, in the portal screens, you have all the same fields that you'll see in the popover, but here's the difference. You do not have to go and should not go to those screens to add data. You can edit it there, but you shouldn't be adding them there. The reason the way I've set this up to program it is you don't have to leave this screen in order to create records in the other screen. So let's look at that. If I go into this screen, for example, which is the CRM call management, it allows you to add data. The first field not this one because it's automatically entered, but you can take any field and add it, and it creates a record in a scrolling list of records. So every time I go to a new record, it says auto entry, enter an example like the time or date, and then a drop down list and so forth. It gives you hints about what goes in these fields. Of course, obviously call notes would be the notes from the call that you made that are for each individual time you do a call. Now, one of the things that makes this interesting is the call date is straightforward. Plus, if there are, say, a callback that you're going to do, next callback, and that date needs to be done and you have to do it at a certain time, you're looking at putting a pending on it when you go in here if you have not done it yet. And what it'll do is it'll highlight that in the list view so you'll know all the different records that have not been called at the time they're supposed to. So for example, in this one it says next callback is the date October 20th, which is actually today. And the next one would be the callback time. So you'd have a date and a time that you're supposed to make a callback. So let's say you actually did the callback, which you would come down here and you'd say call complete, and it goes from red to green and it says that call was completed. And the data for that call would be put in here as far as notes that you wanted to keep and things that are interesting about the call that you may need to use. Then you can do create another call, and this can either be done at the time you want to do it, or you can forecast it as making a call on a certain date or setting this up at a certain date, and then go ahead and setting the actual time and date that you want to make the call, and then set the status to pending. So you can do as many of those as you need to do to set them up. Then if you go over and you look at the actual list view for that, let's go over and look at the list view. We'll go down here to list view for call management, and you'll see that the status up over here, the sort of the orange sherbet color, tells you that this is a call that should have been done by this date based on what is in the actual record. This one should have is not done yet, so it is a call completed actually. And this status can also be changed here. So if you're looking at this and you're looking for your calls today, and you look at the dates when they're supposed to be due, that's when you should be making, like it says, the next call date. So right next to this is the date. Either I made a call here and I want to do another one on this date. So this is the date I'm doing the callback. Initiated one here, and the next one is a callback. And this one is pending. It has not been done yet, and it also doesn't have a date on it, so I'll put the 26th in there. And as soon as this one is actually done, then we'll know that we've called Mr. Brown or Mike Brown, and we've completed that call, so we'd make it now call complete, if you see what this does. Okay, so that's the list view. Let's go back and go back to the customer data. The next one is very similar, which will speed this information up. Basically, in this screen, we have a meeting scheduled for the meeting date, time, And what is the meeting type? It's a sales meeting, training meeting, budget meeting, billing, contract, proposals. If you have different meetings, like a client meeting that you want to put in there with a new type, click on the edit button like we did before and add your new kind of meeting type in there. Then you would basically go to the agenda. In this case, I do a little blurb about agenda, and then you have a sample agenda. It's best to put them in where you put a numeric number, and then you list them in the order you want to actually address them. This area over here is where you put meeting agenda attendees, in this case the attendees for the meeting, and you can probably, if you want to, actually address the numeric number for the questions that you have on this side in the agenda. If you're doing a presentation, who's going to do the presentation? Well, number one is going to be me, second one's going to be George Smith, and so forth. And that would be listed over here so you know who's actually doing the presentation on that agenda item. The last one is the notes. You might want to pick off notes that are used to recall high points in the meeting and things that would be something that you believe you need to keep notes about that is particularly interesting about that particular meeting. And of course, you can just add as many meetings as you need to. Here's the next one. Now understand that this right now, the indicator is that this is the meeting notes for client ID number 1. We're in that record for client ID number 1. So all those that you're building right now are for this client. If you go to a different screen, they're going to be for that client and all the meetings and call and everything for that screen. So if I went to the next record, or I said maybe I have to go back to the top to the first record. Let's go back first. Okay, prior. Okay, first. Okay, anyhow, I would go to the next one and it'd be number 2. Maybe I don't have any customer data screen records for another person. I believe I do though. So anyhow, we would go down to the next one, and then we could see that when we go to like item number 2, as far as the ID up here, then that would be messages for the next person in the group. Okay, let's go to the meeting agendas, and I'm going to go ahead and say what these are about. For example, I said the date for the meeting. We went all through this, so I can go to the portal directly if I want to, and without having to go to the meeting action map up here, and I can go directly to that from there. So we can use the portal button in any one of these sections to get to that location that we want to go. And of course I do have a video help down there, so if you wanted to know more about this particular information, you could review that in the help. Okay, let's go now to the next thing, which is our client actions. And this would be the portal. I'm kind of going in the reverse. This was created by the screen in the contact data, and this would be the portal, and what it's doing, it's reflecting the exact information that you created. Now I do not want you to create these here, but you can edit them in here. So you could, if you wanted to change this in here, or say like you did a find and you had a group of records where you wanted to add one statement for the action description, you could do that in there if you wanted to and go through them by doing a find. Put the information that you're looking for or the screen either by the date, or say for example sales quotes, or maybe Mary Jane stuff, or the date or the time, or in this case the action delivery to, who it's going to be delivered to, or the action status as far as action complete. And again, we have action complete and pending, which are the principal ones that we use, and those would be things that you would want to look for in the list view. So if we went over to the action list and went to the list view, now you would see something similar. Here's the drop down in here. And this is where, when you're looking for action items, you can see the person for the action item. You can see the date for the action item when it's supposed to be due, completed. If it's past the due point where it's supposed to be done, it'll highlight that as far as a color, and they're saying that it's at that particular point it's due. A white one means that it's not yet due. A little description of the actual item. Now if you click on that or tap on it, it'll bring down the full thing, and it may go down the page depending how long you made that. Another situation is the action type. If I click in there, actually I didn't do the drop down on this side. The sales type, I didn't want people editing this in this screen, so you'd go back into the edit here and then make the changes over here, and then you can go directly back to it, and then you could see them. Now understand that a list view has all the records in selection, meaning if you had all the records, you would have a long list of them if you had a lot of data put in. And the find becomes very important when you do a do action find and perform the find. you have to look for specific information that is related to the actual data here. But you can do this. You can go into this screen and pick certain data. For example, I wanted to see every action deliverable that went to Alice. And then if I did the find in this screen and then went back to the list view, interestingly enough, only those for Alice would be shown up here. So you can use the edit screen to do the find and then come back here and see the changes that were done based on the actual records that were found. So that's a common thing that you need to know. And once again, like I stated earlier in this video, if you're looking at this screen and somebody has done a find and you see a lot less records than you'd expect, then you want to go up to the Do Action menu and then click on Show All and then bring back all the records. And from this screen, you can do exports from this same screen based on the actual client action items fields. But it's better to do it within a portal within the actual database where you're at. For example, if I went to the action items, I would do that right here for exporting, because then you can see all the fields that are available and you can pick and choose what fields you want to do. Because if you start an export, it's going to actually ask you which fields you want to do. And while you're sitting in here with the dialog, you can pick off the ones you know you want to use. That's kind of an interesting thing too that you can do within the actual customer data, in that you could do a selection and then you pop over and look at the list view, which we haven't looked at yet. If you're in here and you see John Smith and you want to go see what all the records are in the application, you can say Show All, and you can see how it brought back up the records. The reason we couldn't find that record when we were looking at the prior screen, it was hidden from your view because it was used in a find and it did not return all the records. So that's why I was unable to find it. So if I went back now to the screen that we were in customer data, and I would go next, I should see it. And there's the next record. So that's why I couldn't find it. Interestingly enough, when you get used to those kinds of things, it tells you that they're available, and you need to understand a little bit about the way that this application is used and how you have to make sure that all the records are in selection. That's why I kind of hid it from you and didn't bring it up right away, because I knew that there was an issue. And now you know, when you see problems like that and you can't go through records, it's a good idea to go ahead and do the Show All Records, so that you know all the records in the current selection are available before you start changing the records in selection. Okay, and for example, if the highlighted record that you're actually located in, if you do an omit, I'm just going to show you this, say omit the record, and it took the record away. Now you can go down and pick and choose through a lot of records. If you did a find set and you're looking at that set and you say, oh, I don't want that record, I can just omit it. And then of course you can do the opposite. Recognize that I'm looking at John Smith. If I come back over to Do Action and I say Show Only Omitted, now it's flipped to this one for Mike Brown. So if I had a whole set, maybe 10 records or so or more, I could do Show Omitted and it would show me the opposite, all the records that are actually in the other side of the set that are other records that were omitted. There's reasons for doing that. Now, for example, I can also go back and say Show Omitted again, and it goes back because that one was now omitted. It'll bring that set back also. This is just manipulating records. And the same thing works if you're in our set of records, and let's go say Show All first. Now I'm back to the Show All Records. I can pick from all the records there to go to the one I want to edit. And I could say edit this record, which is ID number 2, and this is Mike Brown. The other one was John Smith. Now that if I take a look at these records over here, so for example, let's go to meetings. This is the meetings for John Smith. So you can see, for Mr. Brown, I'm sorry. So you go in here and you can see all the different records that were in here for him. And if you go over here, you can see Mike Brown. And the same thing for his actions. If there are any, they're going to be in here for him under ID 2. So you can see that you don't have to go out and search that much. You go to the client record, you go to the thing that you're looking for, like call management and all that, or you can go just to that particular item in the application menu. You can go to a list view for call, and you'll see all the calls in here, and then you can do a find specifically for maybe all the John Smith ones or all the Mike Brown ones, or whoever the record is for that record as you add new people. So this is the primary contact over here. Now you can print this portion over here. I extended these out here because there is not a lot of call for printing the guy's name with him on an average. But say, for example, you wanted a list of all the current call management items that you're looking for, this would be where you would go to do that. Now you could change the format of the way the screen's set up and do a landscape mode and then reduce it if you have a laser printer and bring all the data in and print it that way. It'll just make the text a little smaller. So there's some flexible things you can do. And how do you print? Well, you go down to the print records and bring up this dialog. Now, one thing that you need to know about is down here it says records being browsed. That would be the current set. Or if you're looking like you're in a portal or in a client record, if you click on current record, it'll only print that current record. Don't use blank records showing fields. That's something you probably not want to do. Both on iOS and on the desktop Mac and PC, you can do PDFs. You can create a PDF, save as a PDF the data that's in this group, and it'll go ahead and do that for the current set. You can add to a PDF. There's all these other things. Now, this is on the desktop. Whatever kind of things are available on the desktop or on your iOS device will be added to this list. Save as a Postscript, that's kind of an odd one. I don't think I'd ever use that. You can open PDF in preview and look at it. Now, that's another thing. We don't have any screen fields in this application where we have images to speak of. If you have an application where there is images and you save them as PDFs, and you're setting up an application where you have PDFs, you can actually view the entire PDF. You can add the PDF to a email and send it, or you can save it as a PDF file to go to your desktop or save it on your Mac. Okay, so let's kind of recap where we're at. We've gone through and we've looked at the customer data screen and the popovers. We've taken a look at the do action menu. We've already talked before about the logout and how to create a new record only in this screen, because if you don't see a new add new, don't do it. Don't add one. I want to point out, if you're on an iOS device and you bring up the keyboard, there's a little plus and minus icon. Do not click on those. The plus and minus icons are for adding and deleting a record. Those should not be used. If you're going to delete records or needed to be deleted or add records, use the only screen where you're supposed to add them, where the button is available. If you don't see an add button, then it's not supposed to be added. If you don't see a delete button, it's not supposed to be deleted. Okay, if you have any questions and you need any assistance, you can go to our website at ontargetsolutions.biz, and we'll be happy to chat with you, answer your questions. You can send us emails and get any support you need. This application includes technical support for the application free. So take and use the free application support anytime you want by going to our support site and starting a chat, or send us an email and ask for support at vclement@gmail.com for the email address to ask questions. Thank you for using this application.